Portland. It's a city with a long and rich history, reaching even before its official founding in 1786. It's a resilient and strong city with the motto Resurgam, which is translated from Latin as I shall rise again. It's a city that has been destroyed and rebuilt from the ground up, such as when it was destroyed by British Navy vessels in 1775 during the Revolutionary War. Through the years, Portland has stuck to this motto, and nowhere is that better seen than after the Great Fire of Portland, Maine, which left the city forever changed. It was a celebratory 4th of July in 1866. This Independence Day was the first celebrated since the Civil War ended, so it was called for festivities as soldiers returned home and the nation was one again. A parade was to take place on the streets, and the state's largest fireworks show was scheduled for that night. The day was supposed to be a great day of renown, a day of unalloyed pleasures to the thousands here in town, who cheerfully looked forward the day to celebrate, the great conflagration states. But alas, that wasn't the case. The day had warning signs since the beginning. Earlier in the day, a hot air balloon was set up out of Deering pasture, where it was swiftly destroyed and, quote, to pieces it was torn, by the harsh winds that would eventually be the downfall of Portland that day. It was around 4 o'clock when two boys were playing with firecrackers down on Commercial Street, near what now is Hobson Landing, when one threw a firecracker into a pile of wood shavings, which spread to a nearby shed, starting the infamous fire that would ravage the city that day. The words, "Fire," were shouted, alerting the local firefighters. The fierce winds carried the fire to the Portland Sugar House, which, to the surprise of everyone who thought it was impossible to burn due to the brick used in construction, was burnt to the ground. Once the sugar house was burnt, the fate of the night was sealed. The owner of the sugar house, John Marshall Brown, recalled the event in a letter to Alida Brown 2 days after the fire.
Prevented from writing to you by sheer physical fatigue and weariness of body and soul, and even now here are tears in my eyes and tears in my heart as I attempt to tell you the appalling calamity that has fallen upon us here in Portland. Part of it you must have already seen in the newspapers. Just as we were ordering the horses harnessed to return, a man came, riding up most furiously, and shouted, "The sugar house is on fire!" I remember saying, "Good God, how can it be?" and then rushing confused to the stable. When we reached the scene, the whole of the immense building was in flames. We saw that all attempts to save it were fruitless. For 5 hours we fought the fire, but no purpose. Everything was destroyed. After the sugar house was all gone, we looked about us. No words can describe the awful grandeur of the scene. As far as we could see to the northeast, every building was on fire. The flames seemed to rise to the very zenith, and air was filled with flying cinders. It was evident that nothing could check the progress of the conflagration, and the only course left was to save life and property. The noise of the flames was like a hurricane, and wherever the hot blast swept, everything went down before it.
As the sun went down, the wind got stronger and fiercer, spreading tinders and sparks to rooftops across Portland, until most of the buildings northeast of the harbor were in flames. The wooden houses that the Irish immigrants lived in were engulfed, and the people and animals that lived there fled to the streets to escape the fiery blaze of what they used to call their home. There were screams, overlapping with the sound of crashing and crackling of the unstoppable force. The skies of Portland became orange as the firemen could do little to stop it. The fire was described as superhuman that they were powerless to stop. The firemen were running out of water, but the fire continued northeast into the night. From Center Street to Cotton, cross Union, then to Plum, Exchange, then to Middle. The flames like lightning run. The fire eventually reached the fireworks, which when they were lit was described as the whole heavens were illuminated by a lurid glare of light, and the scene became most fearful to the thousands that dread night. The fireman Frank Merrill recounts,
A big rocket whizzed over my head. Perhaps you think I stayed, but I didn't. I laid down the pipe and I ran. That's all I could do.
Residents having nowhere else to go ran to the Munjoy Hills Cemetery, the only thing not destroyed, which soon became the citizen sanctuary from the calamity. One of the people taking refuge was the painter G. Frederick Morse, who created haunting portrayals of the fire and the chaos and panic it caused. The citizen Ruth Pierce Crocker recounts,
Every hand, every printing press, every lawyer's office in the city is burned, 8 churches and dwelling houses and stores innumerable. It is said that there are 8,000 people without a house or a shelter. You can judge something of the distress and confusion that abounds. The sidewalks are literally covered with furniture. The city is doing what it can for the relief of the sufferers.
The story was in every local newspaper, and word spread quickly, with towns as far as Yarmouth being touched by remnants and experiences. I reached out to local historian Katie Worthing to explain.
Okay, so looking at our collection here at the Yarmouth History Center, we have a few artifacts that exist in our collection that were collected at the time of the fire in Portland in 1866. Probably the most distinctive is this little scrap of paper that someone's written a note on saying that they picked it up on the Yarmouth Forest side after the Portland fire of 1866. So you can see it's all singed around the edge. It was picked up by the winds and blown all the way to Yarmouth during the fire. The back of it contains just a few clues about what this document was originally, perhaps a letter or some other signed document. You can see the signature there of Jacob Cattell. We also have a sheet, the first page of the Portland Daily Press from July 6, 1866. And it is kind of a recap, just a couple days after the fire, of what's happened. The headlines are really telling. The first one saying, "Terrible fire, the largest that has occurred in the United States. 1,500 buildings destroyed, 8 churches burned, all the banks destroyed," which is kind of wild. Law offices too, sugar house and foundries. So it's just running down all of the losses just a few days after the fire. So they've really just kind of started making sense of what's gone on.
In 14 hours, the fire had burnt out after having nothing else to devour, leaving nothing but ruins of what was the great city of Portland. In total, the fire left 10,000 people homeless, destroyed 1,800 buildings, destroyed 1/3 of the city, 4 were killed, and caused $12 million in damages, or today's currency, $390 million. But Portland, true to its motto, didn't let this discourage them. Portland gave out rations of soup, coffee, bread, and other food to those living in tents on Munjoy Hill. These rations were donated by nearby towns. They established a relief committee. Rations and donations were sent from cities ranging from Boston to Philadelphia. Portland did not put these donations to waste, as they began swiftly rebuilding with the now iconic brick buildings that Portland is known for today, to stop another fire from decimating the city. The unstoppable spirit of Portland kept them working year-round for 2 years until it was finished. The city was rebuilt brick by brick from the ground up, and by 1868 the city was completely rebuilt and ready if another fire was to strike. Portland proves time and time again that it can and will build back stronger than ever, and it won't give in to hardships it experiences, and that's why it's such a unique and special city to so many.